Hello everyone. Today I will answer the trolley problem. Since this is my first video, I would appreciate any feedback on my idea. If you have any counter arguments to my answer of the trolley problem, I'll be more than happy to answer them in the comments. At first, I'll explore some broad concepts, but stay with me for a conclusion that's both simple and beautiful. To answer the trolley problem, we first need to take a look at empathy. Specifically, we need to understand how the level at which we are able to relate and empathize with someone or something is a deciding factor in how strong our emotional response will be, which in turn affects how morally wrong we judge an act against them to be. As an example to show this, I will pick the topic of eating animal meat. Most people, when eating animal meat, like cows and chicken, do not feel like they are doing anything morally wrong. But if, for example, you were to serve the same people dog meat, then they will be more likely to feel uncomfortable with it. Now, why is that? Some people might argue that it's about intelligence, but other animals, like cows and pigs, are about as smart as dogs. The reason why people will feel more bad for dogs is because people can empathize more with dogs. To understand why that is the case, we need to understand how empathy works, because how well we can empathize with something or someone dictates how morally wrong we will perceive something to be. Now, what exactly do you think empathy is, and how does it work? When we empathize with someone, what we're doing is simply running a simulation in our head of the other person's experience. To help us visualize this, let's try something. Take a minute and try to imagine hearing that your friend or someone you know well has been hurt by being run over by a car. What just happened in your brain? You imagined, simulated that person's experience of being run over by a car, and that made you feel bad for him. Let me clarify why I'm comparing empathy to a simulation. When we imagine something, we are recreating a picture of the thing we are imagining in our brain. In other words, when we are imagining something, we are copying or imitating that picture or experience in our brain. The word simulation means to imitate or copy. Therefore, when we are imagining someone's experience, we are imitating, simulating their experience in our brain. So I have a question for you. If when we are just imagining someone's experience, we are recreating and simulating it in our brain, so why would you expect yourself not to feel similar emotions to the person whose experience you are simulating? If they are sad because someone close to them got hurt, and you're simulating in your brain someone close to you getting hurt, then you can suddenly feel what that person is feeling. And that is exactly what empathy is. Now that we explained empathy through a simulation, let's do it in another way, through visualizing empathy as a mind movie. When you hear something as distressing as a friend's accident, it's like you're suddenly the main character in their story. You picture the scene, feel their pain. The better you know them, the clearer and more vivid this movie plays in your mind, intensifying your emotional response. This is why people with very good imaginations often feel deeper empathy. They're really good at filling in the blanks of the story. Now let's move on to empathy with dogs. Now that we clearly understand empathy, let's try to understand why people can empathize more with dogs. The key to understanding why we empathize more with dogs compared to other animals is in our daily interactions and shared experiences with dogs. Since many have dogs as companions, we walk with them, play with them, and even share our emotions with them. That's why eating a dog feels wrong. On the other hand, when we try to empathize with cows or chickens, we don't have as much data, meaning shared experiences, to run a simulation of their experience. So we feel less bad and don't feel like it's wrong to eat cow meat. This wealth of shared moments and emotions serves as a treasure chest of data for our empathetic simulations. The more data we have, the clearer our simulations will be. The clearer the simulation is, the more real and the stronger their emotions will be, which in turn will make us feel that it is more wrong. Just like we feel more wrong about hurting dogs than cows because we empathize more with them, the same principle applies to our feelings towards humans. Because we can empathize even more deeply with humans than with dogs, hurting a human feels more wrong. This shows how directly our empathy levels influence our moral judgments. The same way we empathize with dogs is how we empathize with people. The more we have in common with someone, whether we have the same background, share the same political or religious values, or like the same activities or foods, will make it easier for us to empathize with them. These points we have in common, from how we grew up to what we like, serve as data points that help us simulate the other person's experience. There's a lot of information needed to simulate someone's experience, from their perspective and how they process things to how it affects them emotionally. Your brain can't fill in all the blanks through perspective taking because you have a limited amount of short-term memory. But if you have a lot in common, then you don't have to fill in the blanks because you know it already. Now that I showed that what we judge to be wrong is based on our levels of empathy, let's try to understand why we feel that it is wrong when we see someone hurting someone else. To understand why we have a sense of morality, we have to understand how we react emotionally when someone does something bad to us. When someone does something bad to us, that makes us feel upset or angry, which in turn makes us feel that what was done to us is wrong. When we see someone doing something bad to someone else, we can also feel that it is wrong. Because once we can visualize that person's experience, it feels as if that wrong thing is being done to us. So just like we originally judge an act against us to be wrong, once we can feel someone else's experience of being wronged by simulating it, we can suddenly not only feel that it is wrong to do something bad to us, but also to do something bad to someone else. Now that we understand how our ability to empathize makes us decide how morally wrong something is, we can now answer the trolley problem. The answer is that fundamentally, there is no answer to the trolley problem. But now we can understand why no answer for this problem exists or will ever exist. Because the problem is not with the answer, it's with the question. We make moral judgments through empathy. So the dead end that we run into when trying to solve the trolley problem is that our brain is not capable of simulating 2 deaths, since it's not capable of dying 2 times. Once you die once, there is no dying twice, because death to us means the end to everything. So if we die twice, then our first death wasn't a real death. So when we need to make moral judgments about more than one death, our software simply is not meant to do such a simulation or operate that way. And because the trolley problem requires your brain to simulate, empathize with multiple deaths, our software, which decides what is right and what is wrong, crashes, because it's not capable of simulating multiple experiences at once. You are one brain. You are incapable of simulating 2 experiences or 2 brains at once. You might ask, but that people feel worse when they hear about multiple people dying at once. But that is because even we can, from an emotional standpoint, only fully empathize with one death, we can still understand on a cognitive level that 2 deaths are worse than 1, which does end up making us feel worse when 2 people die. This is how we are still able to make complex moral judgment calls involving multiple people in our day-to-day lives. Now let's consider another perspective. Research has shown that people are capable of empathizing with communities, which might suggest that we can empathize with more than one person at a time. However, the reason we can empathize with a community is that we often start to visualize the community as a single entity, a person with its own personality and traits. Think about how we attribute characteristics to entire groups. We might describe a community as resilient, friendly, or hostile. In doing so, we're personifying the community, giving it human-like qualities that we can relate to on an individual level. This personification allows us to use our standard empathetic processes, which are designed to understand one individual's experience at a time. If you notice, when people speak about communities, you often replace the word community with someone else's name. You can often replace the word community with someone else's name, and the sentence still makes sense. For example, saying the community is grieving is similar to saying John is grieving. This linguistic substitution highlights how we mentally process a group's experience as if it were a single person's experience. By visualizing a community as a singular entity with a personality, we're able to empathize with it using the same mental simulation we use for individuals. This means that while it appears we're empathizing with multiple people simultaneously, we're actually empathizing with the idea of a singular personified community. Connecting back to the trolley problem, understanding this helps us see why the trolley problem is so challenging. Our brains are wired to empathize by simulating a single experience, even when that experience represents a group. When faced with a trolley problem, we're asked to make a moral judgment involving multiple lives without the ability to properly simulate multiple deaths simultaneously. Our empathetic software isn't equipped to handle that kind of simulation, leading to a sort of moral paralysis or indecision.